You often hear about failure of a program due to a CMC failure. I kind of disagree with that in that most often, so certainly CMC is difficult and the work that we do is not always easy and there are technical challenges to be sure. But more often than not, what I've seen is that these failures that are assigned to CMC are really more a function of lack of understanding of what the job actually is and what's required in order for a program to succeed in this area.
Hey, smart scientists. Welcome to another episode on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. We work in a diverse industry. We have big biotech, we have small, innovative startup companies, and we have anything in between. So what are the differences? What are the advantages? And how does the culture differ between these different companies? I'm having a conversation exactly about that today with Mark Melville, who is the Vice President of CMC, Biologics at Cullinan Therapeutics. He began his career in large biotech companies and later shifted to smaller startups. He now works in a virtual setting, outsourcing all development and manufacturing. And we're going to talk about working at a small biotech. How do you make decisions in a small biotech? And also we're going to look at the outsourcing of development and manufacturing. Stay tuned for an exciting conversation. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Mark, to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show today. Mark, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
I think where I would go there is a lot of people view CMC and bioprocess development as a source of problems. You often hear about failure of a program due to a CMC failure. I kind of disagree with that in that most often, so certainly CMC is difficult and the work that we do is not always easy and there are technical challenges to be sure. But more often than not, what I've seen is that these failures that are assigned to CMC are really more a function of lack of understanding of what the job actually is and what's required in order for a program to succeed in this area. And it's a lack of understanding and a lack of ability to assess risk of what these activities involve. And so I think bringing appropriate people that understand that risk, either through consultants or through direct hires, is really essential at an early stage, especially small biotech really doesn't understand that. But I think big companies kind of lose sight of that too sometimes when you become very siloed and you have that lack of understanding across different functions, that you blunt your ability to assess risk appropriately and plan for it. Because if you plan appropriately and you plan your backup strategies appropriately, you can avoid most of those problems that you might run into, or at least mitigate them.
Yes, you're making a good point here, Mark. I agree. This is my experience as well. And before we jump into our main topic, let's start talking about yourself. So how did you get started in biotech and what pivotal moments and decisions brought you to your current role?
Yeah, so A pivotal moment for me was when I was finishing up my postdoctoral fellowship. So I had received my PhD. I was 3 years into my postdoc and looking for what I was going to do next. And I was looking around at the academic world. I had a young family at the time, married, 2 young kids, and I didn't really like what I saw. What was really needed to succeed, at least then, I don't know if it's changed now, but what you needed to do to succeed in an academic environment was not appealing to me. And in fact, there was a moment when my advisor was talking about somebody that she'd worked with, and she had a lot of admiration for this man because he worked so hard on a textbook that his wife divorced him. And to her, that was a sign of his dedication to the science and the craft. And that was not the kind of dedication that I wanted in my life. I wouldn't want to lose a family over a textbook. That spurred me to look into industry, and I thought I could find a better work-life balance there, or I was hoping. And it was a classic case of just networks that ultimately led me into bioprocess development. I didn't even know it was a field when I was looking around. This was back in 2001 that I started looking for what my next job was going to be. And through some very kind friends and friends of friends, managed to get connected with a couple of potential jobs in the industry, and it was hired. That was at Wyeth in 2002, was my first role in industry. Looked more appealing to me, and I've never regretted the decision.
Wow. And what I see also in your story is that I've interviewed now several people on this podcast that for many of us, including myself, getting where we are today was not planned. I myself could not imagine now running my own company in the biotech space. I mean, that was never something I planned for, and it did happen. I mean, like you, I didn't even know that bioprocess development was a field when I started out my career. Since you've seen it all, you have worked with the very big names of the pharmaceutical world, and now also the very small ones in the startup environment. I am curious, Mark, what are the main challenges that biotech scientists often encounter in bioprocess development or the manufacturing of biologics?
Well, there are technical challenges, of course, and those have only gotten, as we've mastered manufacture and development of monoclonal antibodies, we've only gotten more challenging with all the different types of molecules that we're trying to make today. So that's entirely new modalities. So that there's all those technical challenges. But in the small biotech space, what I find is, back to my initial comment, is a lack of understanding of what's required for a successful development and manufacturing program. So lack of understanding of CMC, because small biotech companies are not founded by CMC people. It doesn't make, well, why would we do that? It doesn't make any sense. We would found CDMOs if we were going to found anything, but because we're not experts in therapeutic areas, and there's a logic to that. And so the challenge there is all around communication. And that's the main challenge that I find is making sure that I'm communicating what needs to be communicated, both for the program as well as for the function. And that was a big lesson that I needed to learn to improve my ability to communicate to key stakeholders within the company, as I learned more and more about outsourcing to CDMOs and vendor networks, how to communicate effectively with them and find my ideal way of approaching programs and outsourcing to vendors. It's a constant learning thing, always trying to adapt what needs to be communicated and how it needs to be communicated, especially internally. And right now I'm at a growing company, so it's a shifting challenge. My current company's grown a lot over the past year. So it started very small. Now we're about 100 people. So the challenge continues to evolve, but communication is one of the biggest challenges.
Now, looking a bit closely at the differences between the very big companies and the smaller or startup, or like a company like yours that's growing, that's now probably more a mid-sized company, what are the unique challenges and advantages of working at a small biotech compared to a larger organization?
I'd say speed, and speed is both an advantage and a challenge. It's a challenge for a small company because we have to go fast. Small company, startup biotech has no revenue. All we do is spend money, and particularly CMC early on spends a lot of money. So getting things done quickly, moving fast is essential in order to stay ahead of that cash burn. That's a challenge that we're constantly faced with, is moving fast. At the same time, it's to our advantage being a small company. So decision making is extremely fast compared to a large company. There's no committees. There's very little hierarchy to move through. An effective small company empowers the people to make decisions. Again, those decisions need to be effectively communicated, but decision making is very fast and it really enables us to move quickly. And when there are those crisis moments where maybe we need additional input, either external from consultants, maybe on a particular technical challenge, or maybe perhaps a big shift in a program or delay even, that can be quickly and effectively communicated as well. So we can move fast and we can respond fast. So speed is both a challenge and an advantage. I think also related to that, I kind of alluded to big advantage is transparency in a small organization. Not everybody can know everything. It's not always helpful, but certainly having direct lines of communication with all of your partners. Departments sometimes consist of one person if the company's small enough. And so having those direct communications with all of your partners, quality, regulatory, clinical operations, supply chain, we're always talking constantly. That's a huge advantage. I think we can just get things done much, much faster.
And how do you manage wearing different hats? Because as a small company, you don't have the luxury to hire a lot of different people. So you have to do a lot of different things. How do you do that? And how do you thrive in that environment?
It's an interesting one for small biotech. So yeah, it is a challenge. I certainly have found myself working in areas that I hadn't anticipated before, participating in site initiation visits for clinical sites. I never would have thought that I would be involved in that, for example. It can be a burden. It's certainly a challenge. But the way I've been looking at it recently, because I've been part of a growing team, is for a small company, that's actually a significant advantage because it's something we can offer to people that might be interested in joining our company. Those are areas of growth. Those are opportunities for people to expand their career rather than coming in and at a large company, you might come in and do one thing, work in one department, and that's what you're going to do. And that might be the right thing at your particular career stage. But at a small company, you get some unique opportunity to say, get more involved in quality. If that's something that you think you might be interested in, a small biotech is a great way to get exposed to that without fully committing to it. Or regulatory, or again, any of these areas that are adjacent to the core function of CMC and bioprocess development, you have opportunities to expand your knowledge base, which then in turn makes you more attractive as you develop your career.
And what have you noticed in terms of differences in the culture or the work environment?
One thing that I've really appreciated about going to small biotech compared to large companies is there is significantly less BS, for lack of a better term. There's no time for politics and posturing. There's no departments competing for resources. There's no place for it. Anyone that's interested in doing that or gets stuck doing that for some reason, I'm not going to cast aspersions on people, but the environment, the small biotech requires such attention to the programs. We're always lean. And we were just talking about, everybody's wearing multiple hats. In order to get the work done, there's just not time to spend on that kind of politics. It's a real focus on getting the job done. I think that's a big difference in the culture. And that's not to say that all big companies have poor cultures. I certainly really enjoyed my time at Wyeth. I thought that was a great corporate culture there. And when I started out, it was a great introduction to the industry. But it's a big company. It's slow. The culture of a small company has to be nimble and fast and focused on the work. And to close this out, though, at a small company, you have the opportunity you're a lot more closer to the patients, which is exciting for me. And I think it's exciting for a lot of us. We see day to day the effect that the products that we're making have on people that are taking them. And it's exciting. It's inspiring.
Yeah, let's talk about the decision-making for a moment, because you mentioned the word speed and slow, and that's definitely my observation. Especially bigger companies, sometimes decision-making is quite difficult in a bigger organization because you have to involve a lot of people. It goes around 3 different corners, even sometimes around the world, and it takes a long time to come to a decision. So let's look about how this works in a small biotech company. What are the factors that influence decision-making?
I think at the core of it, decision-making is most often driven by cost and time. Without small biotech startup has no revenue stream, so you're always working in an environment of limited resources. So cost is always a big factor in decision making. And time, again, going back to speed, getting to the outcome as fast as we possibly can is essential for making sure that the company is still solvent by the time you reach your goal. But also, as our programs develop, particularly the clinical programs that we are supporting, that's what drives value in the company. It's a bigger component of small biotech than it is large biotech because our pipelines are much smaller. We haven't been around for, I don't know how long Pfizer's been around, but decades or a century. We're just not established. So a big part of that influences decision-making is what drives value generation. That's what's needed to raise money, to raise capital. If you've gone public, it drives your stock price. How we do our work and how that influences the value in the company is part of our decision-making process. And that's something that wasn't relevant when I was at a large company. My job didn't have an impact on the stock price or capital raise, but now it does.
And how do you ensure that your decisions align with the small company's long-term goals?
That's pretty easy to do at a small company because of the transparency that we have across these organizations. We're constantly exposed to what the long-term goals of the company are. So they're always in the forefront of my mind because we have direct lines to our CEO, to all of our chief officers. It is always front and center with our discussions. You don't have departmental goals, or you're not focused on just what your function or your department is able to deliver, which you naturally are at a large company. At a small company, we're all working towards the same long-term goals. So they're always right in front of us. And I think that makes it very easy for us to have those discussions, to work together as an entire company to meet our goals.
Hey, smart biotech scientists. I hope you've been enjoying our conversation with Mark Melville, who is the Vice President of CMC Biologics at Cullinan Therapeutics. On Thursday, we're continuing our conversation and we're going to dive into the outsourcing of development and manufacturing activities. What did you think about today's episode? Please tell us by leaving a review. And perhaps you're working in a smaller company and you don't have the CMC expertise in-house, or you're not so sure what the best CMC strategy is. Just book a free call with me. It's a free 30-minute assessment. I want to help you get started so that you can master the CMC development. Use the link down in the show notes, and I see you on the call. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.